We've got a couple of the Queer Tours of London family on this chat as well that I've spotted. We were set up in 2017 by the amazing Dan Glass to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the 1967 Sexual Offences Act, which was the act that partially decriminalised homosexuality in England and Wales. And that's when I first got on board to celebrate that anniversary, running Queer Tours of Soho, which were commissioned by the National Trust, of all people. And then since then, Queer Tours of London has grown, and we run walking tours, not only of Soho, but the West End, Bloomsbury, Stoke Newington in my neck of the woods, and other specially commissioned tours, as well as bus tours and parties, workshops, exhibitions, readings, events, and demos, such as the recent Reclaim the Streets actions in protest over LGBTQ plus hate crime. And other things coming up as well. I'm curating an exhibition to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Gay Liberation Front, the GLF, which hopefully will be on in July, and also a boat party on the Thames as well. So there's loads going on, Ray.
Can you tell us more about the tours of the workshops that Queer Tours are going to be running for the Molly's Masquerade?
I certainly can. So I will be running the Queer Tours, the Queer Tour on Molly houses, which throughout this talk we'll be talking a little bit more about Molly houses, what they were and what sort of happened in them. As well as that, we've got tours to shine a light on sex worker history, trans history, Black history and colonialism and the history of that, and also anti-oppression. And lots of the Queer Tours of London family will be running many of those sessions. Okay,
brilliant. And one of your specific areas of interest is Polari. For anybody who has never heard of it, can you tell me about Polari, please, Dan?
I certainly can, Ray. I'm glad you asked me that. So I've always been fascinated by Polari, which was this kind of secret or hidden gay language, I'm using inverted commas there in case people can't see me, which was spoken predominantly by gay men in the 1950s and 1960s. And it was a patchwork language made up by stealing the best bits of other languages and then sewing all of these different cultures and dialects together. So it contains a lot of Italian and Yiddish, as well as Cockney rhyming slang, and also the language spoken by dockers and sailors, and also the language spoken by West End theatre types, a real mixture of classes and social strata. And it also features a lot of back slang. So for instance, do I have it here? The word, no, ECAF, which means face. So you spell the word out backwards and then you pronounce it. And lots of acronyms as well. So for instance, NTBH means not to be had. And that means somebody who is either unattractive or heterosexual, which is often the same thing. And feminizing nouns and names as well. So for instance, Josie Crystal is Jesus Christ, or Gloria is God. And Polari is a very, I'm going to use the present tense, it is a playful, fun and funny language, but it was also spoken out of necessity, right? So gay men could speak to others in a language in the years before decriminalisation, so before 1967, that only they could really understand. And so by doing that, they could reach out to each other and avoid societal oppression. So straight people would have no idea what they were talking about. Polari speakers were hiding in plain sight pretty much, and there's a lot of power in being able to hide in plain sight. Now, it's so great that we've got Robin here, because Polari received a mass audience in the mid-1960s when it was beamed into the homes of around 9 million people every Sunday on the radio programme Round the Horne, which starred Kenneth Williams, a personal hero of mine, and Robin is also a hero of mine. It's interesting that when I was, just to digress for a minute, when I was a kid, when I was about 8 or 9, my dad would make me do Kenneth Williams impressions to make grown-ups laugh. Now, if that's not the reason why I'm a massive gay now, then God knows what the reason is. But anyway, the stuff that Ken and another actor, Hugh Paddock, got away with saying on the radio on BBC in the mid-1960s was outrageous. But because it was hidden, what they were saying, it meant that they got away with it. So, for instance, people like Mary Whitehouse and the kind of the moral crusaders kind of left Round the Horne alone because they just didn't have a clue what was being said. So, for example, in one episode, Kenneth and Hugh are playing house cleaners. Now, sorry if I butcher this anecdote, Robin, but they're playing house cleaners, and in it, Paddock says to Williams, "The dishes are dirty." Now, if you read that line, "The dishes are dirty," it's very innocent on surface level. But in Polari, the word dish could mean anus. It could also mean attractive man based on how polite your Polari is, which is why Williams replies, "Now, forgive me, Robin." "Oh, speak for yourself." "Sorry, Robin." Now, that was broadcast on a Sunday afternoon on BBC, as I said, which is incredible that these arsehole jokes, rimming jokes, are made on BBC radio in the 1960s. Am I allowed to say rimming before midday?
No.
No, okay. So, I retract the word rimming. Anyway, Polari went out of vogue in the 1970s as the Gay Liberation Front. It's great we've got members of the original Gay Liberation Front. Andrew Lumsden, I spot you here in this Polari chat as well. When the GLF gained ascendance, Polari was seen as unfashionable and at odds with the mantra of out of the closet and into the streets. It was seen as a little bit old hat. But there are some words, or old capello, sorry, but there are some words that are in common parlance today, right, which originate in Polari, and people have no idea that they're speaking Polari, which I think is amazing and great. But, Ray, more on that later.
So, what is the connection between Polari and the Mollies?
I'm glad you asked me that, Ray. While we associate Polari with gay men in the 20th century, Mollies in the 18th century would also have spoken a form of Polari, which can be seen as a parent of Polari in the 20th century. So while Polari speakers in the 50s and 60s, 1950s and 1960s, lived mostly under the shadow of criminalization, Mollies risked even harsher prison sentences and possible even execution due to their sexual identity. And therefore, it's even more vital for them, for the Mollies, to have a shared language for protection and solidarity. Now, in this book, which is great, Fabulosa, and when lockdown ends, I would urge you all to go to Gaze the Word bookshop and spend your money in there. In his book, Fabulosa, Paul Baker makes the comparisons between the Mollies and later speakers of Polari. So I'm just going to read you a little extract from this book. And in it, Paul Baker says, comparing Mollies in the 1700s with Polari speakers in the 1950s and 1960s, as well as enjoying sex with other men, both groups used performance, parody, and camp humor, and built social identity around this shared sexual preference. So every other element of their identity was based around their sexual identity, resulting in a community or subculture. Both groups were criminalized by mainstream society, and they were driven underground, and both groups had specific words that were not known by others. So some Molly language can be found directly in Polari without getting changed by the annals of history. And unsurprisingly, most of these words which survive from Molly code are to do with sex and body parts, because as Robin can testify as well, Polari is a very sexual language. So, for example, examples of this are the word trade, to mean a sexual partner, and also to be picked up, meaning to pull. Sorry, trade is sex as well as sexual partner, and also to pull or is to find a sexual partner. Do you remember when we were all allowed to go out and pull? Who remembers them days? Anyway, even the word queen, right, comes from Molly language to mean friend, acquaintance, or notorious person, and then also gay person, with the expression "Where have you been, you saucy queen?" used to greet each other.
Great. And can you say anything more about why you think they created their own language?
Well, I'm glad you asked me that, Ray, because necessity is the mother of invention. And a number of societies at this time in the 1700s were formed, which were about the reformation of manners, and they policed behaviours like swearing and public drunkenness. And within this context, and the fact that sodomy was obviously a crime punishable by prison sentence or worse, the Mollies were despised and very vulnerable. And so this language, as I said, allowed them to hide in plain sight, as well as adopt some form of gallows humour, using the very societal ideas of who they were and how they acted to shape and form their culture in a kind of reclamation kind of way, similar to the camp humour that we see much later in the 1960s with people like Kenneth Williams, but also people like Frankie Howard. And I'd encourage everybody on this Zoom to check out Up Pompeii, which is probably a little bit dated now, but worth seeing for the kind of the camp stylistics of Frankie Howard, and also Charles Hawtrey in the Carry On films as well. The reason I mention them is about this reclamation of camp, which is what the Mollies did. And Mollies in their Molly houses and elsewhere would have been in the company of other criminals, so not gay people, but sort of thieves and other kind of criminals, who would have borrowed from each other's languages and culture. Because Mollies and these other criminals would have met in prisons, and they would have met when they've been driven underground. And the criminals spoke something called cant, which also shaped and informed Polari in the centuries that followed.
Right. You mentioned the Reformation of Manners there, which, for anybody who doesn't know, was a group that was created in Tower Hamlets in 1690. To rid London of profanity and immorality, and particularly the bawdy houses and the molly houses. And in about 5 weeks' time, we're going to have a specific Zoom about the Reformation of Manners with Dan Glass, and we're going to look at the history of homophobia. Bringing it back to cant, can you tell us anything more about cant, Dan?
No, I can't. Only joking, I can. So cant was the 18th century dialect or slang that was spoken by thieves and other criminals who intersected with the Mollies. So there's someone with a great name, Captain Francis Gross, who compiled the Dictionary of the Vulgar Tongue. Now, he compiled that in 1785, and in it he recorded some of its terms, some of the cant language. But think about that. A dictionary of cant is kind of oxymoronic, because the whole point of cant is that it is a language which is indecipherable to the general public. Otherwise, it's meaningless. If everyone can understand cant, then what's the point of cant? Mm. And this is something that links cant with Molly code and Molly tongue, and then later Polari. These are all languages which are not meant to be understood by the general public, because otherwise they're rendered meaningless. But anyway, I digress. So one of the general rules of thumb for cant is that it is extremely descriptive. So you use the word cheat, do I have it here, to mean thing which, okay? So on top of the word cheat, you put an adjective. So a hearing cheat is thing which hears. So it's your ear. So if a hearing cheat is a thing which hears, you know that a smelling cheat is a thing that smells, a nose. So you might also, by the way, need to keep your hearing cheats in good nick to listen out for Lily Law or Betty Bracelet, the police. And so the word cheat to mean thing then is found much later on in Polari. So for instance, thumping cheat. So thumping cheat, thing which thumps, is your heart. So you might say, "Oh, be still, my thumping cheat," if you saw an attractive dish, or chicken. Attractive dish meaning younger gay man, not just an attractive arsehole. There is what I mean. By the way, am I allowed to say arsehole before midday? Ray, am I allowed? Okay, sorry, just checking. By the way, I find it funny that chicken means younger gay man, and cottage is place in which you would have sex. So a chicken cottage is a place where you'd have gay sex with a younger gay man, and today, you know, it's a very successful range of fried chicken shops. But anyway, so next time you go to a chicken cottage, just think what you could be doing. But anyway, in cant, a trundling cheat is a thing which trundles. So that is a horse and cart, or a prancer and cart, because horse is prancer, because it's a descriptive language, and horse is prance. But anyway, but in the age of Polari, obviously we have fewer horse and carts in the streets of London. We still have them, but not as many. And so we need to update the language. We need to update cant. So trundling cheat is still a Polari expression, but it no longer means horse and cart, it means cab or taxi. Now, some of these cheats are a little bit more cryptic. So for instance, lullaby cheat, you might think that that is a thing which lullabies. You might think it's a musical instrument. That's what I thought when I first heard it. But it's actually an infant, a child, or a toddler, thing which you perform a lullaby to. Or a rubbing cheat is a thing which rubs your neck, because it's the gallows, which is a place where many cant speakers risked ending up, obviously. Now, what I found interesting when I was researching cant for this Zoom is that the word queer is very common, but the word queer means something which is bad or a threat to the criminal underclass. So, for instance, a queer rooster is a police informant, someone that's going to grass you up. And my guess is because a rooster makes a loud noise and disturbs the peace, and so a informant will disturb the peace of the cant community. A queer Ken, it's not someone called Ken who's a bit of an iron hoof. It is a place which is bad, because the word Ken means place. So queer place, bad place. So it's a prison. And a queer cull is a fool or an idiot. And some of these cant words were...
We lost him. Oh no. Is it just mine?
No, I can't see him either. He's frozen.
Okay. Let's hope he comes back. We seem to have lost you, Dan.
Now some music.
Yes. I actually read the book as well that you're talking about. And so, very well, I've read half of it. And also just picking up some things that you said, I think the relationship between cant, there is a lot of words for the police. Like Dan mentioned, the Betty Bracelets, the Lily Law, the Jennifer Justice, loads of words for the police, so it shows the relationship with cant as well. And he's disappeared. Hopefully he can come back. I think also, like...
I'm back.
Is he back?
He's back.
Can you hear me?
Back, Dan. We seem to have lost you for a minute.
Where did I get to? What was I talking about?
You were just talking...
Can you recap from the beginning?
Yes. From the very top.
We were just talking about, I read the book as well, so I was just picking up from what you said about the police and like how many descriptive words there were for the police.
Yes, okay.
Also, I noticed just how descriptive it is generally with like the maiden names. So the Mollies had maiden names, which they were given. So there was one Molly I was reading about called Martin McIntosh, but he was an orange seller, so he was known as Orange Deb. Dan, can you tell us anything more about the Mollies' maiden names?
Well, but I can, Ray. Is there anything that I missed? What was the last thing that I said that you heard me say?
I don't think you did. I think we just got to queer Ken and queer Cull.
Okay, great. So that was it then, yeah. Yes, so on the maiden names as well, that's exactly that's right, that they were given, Mollies were given these names to as a sort of a second christening, a form of second christening, a bit like born again Christians, but more fun. And it was a playful and mischievous ceremony, basically, where Mollies would be given a female name, which was a description or a descriptor of their appearance or occupation. And just like in Polari, your new maiden name could either be very, very literal, what you do or what you look like, or cloaked in irony. So a very slim person or a very fat person would be given the name Fat Bertha, for instance. This is similar to Polari, where like a very attractive chicken or a very attractive dish might be given a very dour, frumpy name like Maud in order to bring them down a peg or two. And the Molly ceremonies, the christening ceremonies, can be seen alongside other Molly ceremonies, such as birthing wooden spoons as babies, which I know there's more on during the course of your program, Ray.
I find that like one of the most fascinating parts of the Molly's histories is the fact that they would have ritualistic births to little wooden dolls or spoons. And I know when we start the project, we've got Timberlina who does the spoons workshop. You sent me a picture this week that you'd made your own spoon. I don't know whether you got it, and would you like to share it with the...
She's in the garden.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I could try and run out and get her.
No,
maybe when you talk for a bit, I'll go and get her. But yes, I made my own Molly House wooden spoon the other day. Timberlina sent me the resources to make that. And it's great we've got Arkham on the chat as well, who was part of the wooden spoon sessions as well with Miss John Joe as well.
Oh, so nice! Oh, Arkham's got his spoon.
Oh, great!
Nice. Arkham spoon. There you go. There's.
So the Mollys would make these spoons as their children.
Which is just amazing, and you'll all have the opportunity to make your own spoon doll as well when we launch at St. Margaret's House. So coming back to Polari and the Mollys, well, Polari specifically, how long was the language in use and when did it die out? Or is it still...
First of all, Ray, my lovely flatmate just heard me on the chat and ran out to get my wooden spoon from the garden. Unfortunately, her face is slightly disheveled now, as you know, the annals of time might do that to you. But there we go, there she is. But yeah, on why it died out. Cant was prevalent with the criminal underclass, as I said, in the 18th century, and gay subcultures spoke their own language and dialects and slang for that period up to Polari's height in the 1950s and 1960s. But in terms of Polari, its mainstream success, as Robin can testify, was also the reason for its downfall. So Kenneth Williams and Hugh Paddock had living rooms across the country, as I said, in fits of laughter, even if most listeners, even gay listeners, not just heterosexual listeners, had no real idea what they were talking about. But by the end of the decade, gay liberation groups found this camp representation problematic and saw Polari as naff, which is ironic because NAF in itself is a Polari term, an acronym NAFF, which stands for not available for fucking. So that might apply to a heterosexual person or somebody who you find unattractive, or perhaps somebody with a small basket. Now, in the 1970s, there were still camp representations of homosexuality in the media, such as John Inman in Are You Being Served, who I think gets a bit of a bad press for his representation in that show, because I think there's a lot of power in a limp wrist, and I think John Inman knew exactly what he was doing. But that representation of gay identity was seen as dated and unhelpful in the fight for equality and liberation, and camp culture and Polari were wedded together. And there was, though, this resurgence in the 1990s with this second wave of popularity among students and Channel 4 viewers for people like Frankie Howard, but their heyday was well and truly over by then.
Okay, can you tell us what the most famous words that have come out of Polari or Cant?
I'm glad you've asked me that, Ray, because I can. So, for instance, people will be surprised that from Cant, so this criminal underclass language from the 1700s, we still say booze to mean alcohol. But if you've drunk too much booze, you've ended up with queer booze, booze which is bad and it's made you sick and hungover. And also from Kant and Molly tongue, we've got the term lifting to mean stealing, so shoplifting. So when Priti Patel is on the news this week and she says that shoplifting is at an all-time low under lockdown, she's actually speaking Kant herself. And from Polari, people might be surprised by how much has infiltrated everyday language. So, for instance, fancy a bevy after this. Bevy is also Cockney rhyming slang, comes from Cockney rhyming slang, but it's also a Polari term. And also, let me zhuzh myself up. So to zhuzh your hair, to zhuzh your room, to zhuzh your appearance is a Polari term. And I've got a question for the listeners in the room, which is, can anyone, maybe put this in the chat or put your hand up, can anyone spell the word zhuzh? Oh yeah, we've got, is that a hand, Lou?
Yeah, we've got TJUZ or Juge. Can everybody see the chat? The zoo, the Juji. Has everybody got the chat up there? Gug. Judge. Do you want to give it to us, Dan? How do we shush? Is he frozen again? Dan, are you frozen? Oh, he's gone.
Yeah. Well, I've got two spellings for it.
Go on.
ZHOOSH or ZHOUZHO, which is Romany.
I think it's actually, which I'll put in the chat as well, TSZUJ, which, oh no, everyone, here we go. There we go. So I think that's the actual answer. Okay, so I'm going to fill while we wait for Dan to come back. Some of the words that actually, when you look at the dictionary of, because I had a look at this book as well, like a lot of the words that really surprised me is because I thought they were Northern dialect. So there was like Barney, to have a fight. There was Scarpa, just duck as well, like referring to people as duck. Like if you ever go to Derby, everybody refers to you as duck. What I thought was just fascinating is how much is in regional dialects that we just don't know. And just how much the language has, like the general language has come from Polari and Kant, and the Mollies is just really fascinating.
Well, Barney is also Cockney rhyming slang. Barney, rubble, trouble. Incidentally, everybody, I am available for Cockney rhyming slang workshops. I was due to run one at the Museum of London Docklands next week. Guess what? That's not happening. So I am available for bookings. I'm very, very much available. Anyway, sorry I froze there. I think the last thing you heard me say was nap. Is that right? And mint.
No, we just
zhuzh.
Zhuzh. And
zhuzh,
then
okay.
We got it in the end.
Zhuzh. Okay, so Ducky and Dolly, as Molly was saying, as Ray was saying, terms of affection, and they're known in the north of England as well. In Coronation Street, they're always calling each other Duck, aren't they? I remember Vera Duckworth using that a lot, which shows you the last time I watched it. And Scarpa, to run away. Mince, to walk in an affected camp manner, hence Queer Tours of London and Mince Through Time. And naff, as I said earlier, not available for fucking. But by the way, on acronyms, it is said, now I don't have evidence for this, but it is said that both drag, the word drag, and the word camp come from the Tudor era, with drag standing for dressed as a girl, and camp with a K spelling, known as male prostitute. Now, it might be what Paul Baker describes as a backronym. So it's a word that's been given acronym status later on because it's a nice fit. But that's what some people say.
So can you teach us some more, Dan? Can we have a practice saying some Polari?
Well, I'm hoping that everybody on the chat did their homework, which was Ray sent you all a YouTube link. Don't worry if you've not watched it, but it's worth watching anyway if you're interested. It's a clip of two gay men speaking Polari in a film made by Brian and Carl about 5 years ago. And there's some quick show of hands. Did anyone see that? Some people saw that. Great. So in that film, you've got terms such as national handbag. Does anyone want to guess what national handbag means?
Unmute yourself if you want to take a guess. No?
Is that in the chat? Have we got someone saying it in the chat?
Is it being on benefits?
Absolutely right. It's being on benefits because handbag is money. So national handbag is your national money. There's I'm just using words that were mentioned in that that film. It's worth watching. I might just show you some words here and see if we can work out what they mean. So as well as handbag, gelt is money, Polari is to speak. What's funny is how you misgender words and people. So auntie is actually your father. Gloria, as I said, is God. Cod is bad or vile or naff. I mentioned Josie Crystal, Jesus Christ. The Polari pipe, again, a bit like Kant, it's a descriptive language. So if Polari is to speak, this is the pipe in which you use to speak. So it's your phone. And so there's lots and lots of different words, and it's worth watching that film and then trying to decipher what's being said in that film. But also worth remembering that film is very much spoken entirely in Polari, which is not what would have happened with gay men in the 50s and 60s. It would have been a peppering of Polari in normal English for most people. Basket is a bulge in a man's trousers. And also it's a language which was very much based on where you were in the country. So London Polari would have been different from Liverpool Polari. So for instance, in that film, they use the term Batterseed. To be Batterseed is to have to go to a sexual health clinic, because there was a very famous one in Battersea during the 1960s. Obviously, people in Liverpool would have had less knowledge of that. So the language, the type of Polari you spoke was very much based on where you were in the country and what your social status was.
Mm. You mentioned as well at the start that it's a mixture of Cant and different languages and Yiddish. You mentioned. Have you got any?
I've got a saucy one, Ray. Am I allowed to say nosh off before midday? To nosh off is Polari. Sorry, yeah, it's Polari, and it comes from Yiddish. It means to have oral sex. And even the term blowjob is Polari. It comes from, it's an American term. When the American GIs came over in the 1940s and had their wicked way with all of our British women and men, that was an Americanism, which then infiltrated into Polari.
Oh.
But nosh off is Yiddish.
Examples from, because there's quite a lot of European languages in it as well.
Yeah, so it's very heavily based on Italian, which is why I'm at an advantage to learn it, because I am half Italian. So the counting, for instance, is in Italian, uno, due, but with a London accent, a Count London accent. So in Italian, to count uno, due, tre, quattro, cinque, sei, cinque, otto, nove, dieci, etc., etc. In Polari, it's uno, due, tre, quattro, cinque, sei, like that. So there's a lot of Romani and Italian, but spoken in a Camp London way.
Okay. As in, I think you gave us, I think in the example, it was like, or one of the videos, maybe like with Robin's, the Kenneth Williams, I've heard quite a lot of like, that's your actual French. Yes.
Sorry, I forgot to mention, yes. So it was a language which also had a lot of French in it. And so they would put ETT at the end of words to make them fancy and European, or OYS to make them fancy and European. And again, a bit like the names that Polari speakers would be given, like Maud or even the Molly speakers, there's a lot of humour. So et might be used to make something sound small and feminine, or it might be used on something very large and grand to take the piss out of the fact that it's not small, if you see what I mean. Yeah. And the actual term, and that's your actual French, is both used to show off that someone is speaking French, and then that term in itself meant I'm speaking the God-given truth, and that's your actual French. So you might say that that chicken over there has got a large basket, and to prove you know that, because you've had him in the cottage, and that's your actual French ducky.
So is it used much today? Do we have much examples of it being used at all today?
Well, it depends on what you define Polari as being. I would say that RuPaul's Drag Race is a form of Polari, and a lot of the words from that are spoken by younger gay men predominantly in this country. So for instance, the word work, and you're either spelling the word work W-E-R-K or W-E-R-Q, or my favorite, W-E-R-Q, and the word fierce. And these words are lifted, again, there's that cant word, from RuPaul's Drag Race and wider American pop culture. So the first time Americanisms infiltrate Polari is in the 1940s with words like blowjob, and then with the success of American gay programs through Netflix, we're seeing a new generation of Polari come in.
Great. One of the questions that would be sitting with me is like how much women are part of this and would have been speaking it as well. I know in the Paul Baker book it says that it was spoken by lesbians as well in the 50s and 60s. But he does also say that lesbian speech was associated with gentlemanly restraint or upper class masculinity, which I thought was interesting. But so that's just something, the kind of the gender, I think, because Kant was obviously a criminal language, it could have been likely that women would have been speaking it as well. But just to say, for our next workshop, we're going to be talking to Alex Etchart, who is the musical director of the Sex Workers Opera, and we're going to touch a bit more on gender, and that will be the 14th of May at 3 p.m. Have you got any other film recommendations or anything? We did actually put it in the homework sheet.
Yeah, I do. I also want to say something else that I forgot to mention, if that's all right, Ray, which is about, it came to my mind when I mentioned London accent, because a London accent is more important than you might think, because although Polari was spoken across the nation and also in places like the docks of Liverpool and the ports of Southampton, we do think, I'm sure Robin will agree with me, we do think of it as a London thing, in part because it shares so much of its famous words with Cockney rhyming slang, and also because of Kenneth Williams, who was a Holborn boy born and bred, and also Polari is a very performative language, and it's designed to be more spoken than written, and so that's why it's quite difficult to imagine speaking Polari in an RP accent, so a received pronunciation like the Queen or a 1950s BBC newsreader, unless that's the joke. Unless the joke is that you are dead posh and you're speaking Polari. So, for instance, in Round the Horne with Kenneth Williams, the host of that show, or the anchor of that show, a guy called Kenneth Horne, spoken in an RP accent, received pronunciation accent. And so, again, apologies to Robin if I totally butcher this, but Horne in one episode says, would I have varded any of them, do you think? Varded meaning to see. And Williams, again, apologies, Robin, goes, oh, he's got all the Polari, isn't he? And Paddock says, I wonder where he picks it up, and insinuating that Kenneth Horne has visited a gay place, such as a bathhouse. Yeah. So Polari works best when it's spoken in a camp and Cockney voice in that sketch. And the joke is that it's juxtaposed with received pronunciation, because received pronunciation is the establishment, and because Polari is spoken by gay men, it is very much not the establishment. And so what I want people to try on this Zoom now is just speak a couple of sentences in your most campus Cockney voice you can muster. So just say to yourself, you can still be on mute about, what did you have for breakfast this morning? Yes, or what time did you get up, Ducky? All that kind of thing, and really, really go for it.
Oh, no.
In your mouth. Maybe, Robin, can you give us an example of what I mean?
Oh yes, well, for breakfast I had a couple of delicious sausages, don't you know? Yes, and a couple of fried eggs. Lovely, they were boner, they were. All boner.
Oh, lovely. Well, exactly that. What I want you all to try now is just speak like this. Just really, really plumb it up. You come from the East End of London. You're gonna speak like it, but in a really, really effeminate way, because that's the gateway into understanding Polari, in my opinion, their opinion. So give it a little go now.
Does anybody just give me a wave if you want to have a go? Does anybody want to unmute themselves and give it a go? Is anybody feeling brave?
Well, they're all chickens.
Well, okay, well, I'll tell you what, I'll make it easier for you. I'm going to give you a sentence to practice, okay? And now the sentence goes like this. Sharda there's nada to vada in the larder. Okay, I'll repeat that. Sharda there's nada to vada in the larder. Can you all say that after three, either on mute or not on mute? Sharda there's nada to vada in the larder.
What is it again?
Sharda there's nada to vada in the larder.
Sharda there's nada to vada in the larder.
So does anybody want to guess what they've just said? Sharda there's nada to vada in the larder.
There's nothing to see in the larder, surely.
Absolutely right. There's nothing to see in the larder, but...
Does that mean there's nothing to see down below? There's nothing going on?
Very good, Alex. So, Sharda, it's a shame. Nada, that there's nothing. Vada, to see in the larder. Now, in the larder is where you keep your meat. In the larder is where you keep your sausages. And what looks like a sausage, I wonder, could it well be a gentleman's member? So it's a shame that he had a small penis. Sharda there's nada to vada in the larder. Now, that's an example of how performative and playful the language is. And what I'd like to do now is I'm going to read an extract from a very, very famous book. And I'm going to read it in Polari. And I want you to guess what the book is. I promise you, you're very likely to have heard of it. Okay? Here we go. I need to just go on a Word doc. Here we go. In the beginning, Gloria created the heaven and the earth was nantiform and void, and Munge was upon the eke of the deep. Oh, yes. And the fairy of Gloria trolled upon the eke of the aquas, and Gloria cackled, "Let there be sparkle." And there was sparkle, and Gloria varded the sparkle, and that it was boner, and Gloria met the sparkle from the Munge. What book am I reading?
Anybody?
Bible?
It's the Bible. That is the opening from the Bible, which was translated into Polari in 2017. And this shows you the power of Polari. It still caused a huge amount of controversy and, pardon the pun, mass complaints, showing the power of Polari still to shop.
I actually looked that up, and there's some news articles from 2017 where trainee priests in a theological training college in Cambridge held a full church service in Polari, and then the Church of England had to make an apology for this Polari service. So it would be amazing to find those priests, if we could, and invite them to the Molly's Masquerade, and maybe they could deliver us a service. That would be amazing. So anything else before we talk to Robin? Anything else that you wanted to tell us about where we could learn more Polari, or any other workshops you're running, Dan?
Well, funnily enough, I'm not running many workshops because of this corona thingy, but I am doing a lecture for UCL this very evening at 7 p.m. about queer Soho in the decades before decriminalisation. It's free and everyone's very welcome to come to that. in terms of Polari, I recommend this book, Fabulosa, by Paul Baker. Check out Gaze the Word to buy your own copy. And why I find Polari really interesting is because I'm interested in 20th century social history, social, political, cultural history. That this is where Polari finds itself in. And so to understand the setting better, there's a couple of films I'd recommend. So for instance, the film Victim, made in 1961 with the closeted gay matinee idol Dirk Bogarde as the hero, is really, really important in understanding gay history. It's a film which Polari isn't featured, but the characters definitely would have spoken Polari. And this film really cannot be underestimated for its importance in gay history in this country and in terms of shaping ideas around decriminalisation. It was a film made in 1961, as I said, so that's before decriminalisation, in which the leading character, the hero of the film, is gay, but for the very first time, he is not a baddie, he is not snivelly, he is not a coward, he is not sneaky, he is a hero. He is being blackmailed because of his sexual identity, and he stands up to the blackmailers. He is not someone to be pitied or feared, he is somebody to be admired and respected. So really, really worth watching Victim. It's available on YouTube. Also watch the trailer because it's such an amazing trailer, an amazing film. And you mentioned lesbians, Ray. Mea culpa that I didn't, but there's a great lesbian film which is so, so important called The Killing of Sister George, made in 1968, which is as funny as it is shocking, in my opinion. I gasped, I did. I gasped. I was sat there in my bedroom gasping. God knows what my flatmates thought I was up to. And it's about the Gateways Club in Chelsea, the notorious, or infamous, and much missed lesbian hangout where my mate Jamie Wildman used to work on the door. It's about a lesbian actor who plays a character in a TV soap, and her character gets killed off. What is she going to do about it? So those are my two film recommendations during lockdown, and this is my book recommendation. I also recommend watching Robin Sebastian on all YouTube clips. I've really enjoyed doing that, and also check out my talk on UCL this evening at 7 p.m.
Brilliant, thank you, Dan. I know we're running a bit behind, but hopefully everybody can stay for a little bit longer. So, Robin, I wanted to talk to you about playing Kenneth Williams. Now, you're a bit dark sat there.
I know, sorry. Shall I? I'll move my computer. It's so bright outside, I can't believe it. Now, look. Anybody
who's not met Robin. Yes, that's much better.
Yes.
Anybody who's not met Robin, Robin does look quite like Kenneth Williams.
Well, I put on a few pounds, let's be honest. You see, I have middle-aged spread, which I have on my toast for breakfast every morning, you see. Thank you.
But the voice is so good. Were you doing the voice, and were you doing Kenneth Williams before you got the part in Round the Horne?
Well, funny enough, I used to be a wine waiter at private parties, you see, when I was, when I just left drama school. And I would go around saying, yeah, do you want another bottle up your end? And people going, oh. And then I met an actor, damn, what's his name? But he was in the London Cuckolds at the National. And Terry Johnson was directing that. And he was about to do Carry On Camping, Emmanuel and Dick. And he was looking for a Kenneth Williams. So he said, you do Kenneth Williams, don't you? We didn't sound like that, of course. He said, you do Kenneth Williams, don't you? So I said, yes. And he said, well, do a voice tape and send it to Terry Johnson, which I did, but it was too late by then. And Adam Godley got the part, and he's brilliant. I mean, I'm not being a bitch about him. But it planted the seed in my little noddle that possibly it would be a good idea to do it. And then I got the audition for Round the Horne Revisited in 2003, which was being done on in a fringe theatre, the White Bear in Kennington. And when my agent said, you've got to go up for it, I thought, no, I don't want to do that. She said, because there's no money in it, there's no money. However, he persuaded me to go. And when I turned up, I met the producer, who'd also been one of the writers of Round the Horne, Brian Cook. And I looked at his hair, which was white and coiffured, and I thought, there's money there. There's money. Here you look. And anyway, the audition, of course, went quite well. And that was the beginning of it all. And so we did it in the Fringe Theatre for, I don't know, a month or something like that. Brilliant reviews. I mean, like review pornography. It was that good. I could get a semi-on, that's French wine, ladies and gentlemen, just reading about myself. And then we transferred to the West End, and we were there for a year and a half-ish. So that was great.
Where did you transfer to, and how long?
Oh, it was called The Venue, which is now the Leicester Square Theatre. I mean, there was terrible confusion when I was asking, where are we going to be? The Venue. Yeah, where are we going to be? And we went on, and because I'd never heard of it before. But it's in the basement of a Catholic church just in Leicester Place. And they'd already done Taboo there, which Boy George had written and I think appeared in. So campery was rife there, you see. And it was just wonderful. We were there, well, it was, just under a year and a half. And then we did tours of it. We did a BBC TV special. But of course, in those days, so young and beautiful. Oh, the ravages of age. And then, oh God, I'm burbling on, aren't I? Well, I know that.
I love listening to you.
There's so much, because from there, Jonathan Rigby, who played Horne, and you're a friend of, he and I were asked to do a show called Twice Kenny's Plenty on Radio 4. And this had been written by a woman called Molly Millis, who was a child writer. This is a schoolgirl who used to write for Much Binding in the Marsh, which was a 1950s show, which also starred Kenneth Horne. So she's very clever, and they didn't realise that she was a 15-year-old girl. She was sending in her scripts, and they were actually using them on air. And they were shocked when they obviously found out how young she was. But she'd written this script, and it had been found in Kenneth Williams' belongings. And we were asked to perform it for the first time. And it was supposed to be Kenneth Williams and Kenneth Horne wandering around the BBC. So we having to do lots of other funny voices and whatever. And I must have, when I read it, I thought, what's this rubbish? It's rubbish. We're going to die. But I have to say, the audience absolutely loved it. So that was really good fun. Do you want to ask another question, or do you want me to just carry on?
No, I'm going to open it up to see if, Dan, have you got any questions for Robin, or anybody on the Zoom?
Yeah.
You just know that I'm in awe of you, Robin. You know, I just really am. That's all I've got to say. That I'm just a massive.
I'm fine with that. But I wanted to say that, because I also do Hancock's Half Hour, and I was approached by Neil Pearson, who had bought the scripts of these lost episodes of Hancock's Half Hour, and I'd never really been into it because there's no innuendo in Hancock at all. It's 10 years before Round the Horne, and it's just life. It was the first sitcom. And I've become a massive fan of it. However, the writers, Gorton and Simpson, the first thing they said to me, they were very elderly men. They said, there's no innuendo. That's before they even said hello. And, because I mucked around like crazy in my very first recording. And we've got Simon Greenall in it, who you may remember from Alan Partridge, plays the Geordie Oddjob man, Mike, but he also does the voice of the Meerkats, and he plays Sid James in our show. Even by his own admission, that's not the best impersonation, but he's bloody funny. And the two of us mucked around like crazy. The audience loved it, and I had all these prepared speeches of Kenneth Williams having a Queenie Fitch, you see. And we absolutely stored. It was just one of the funnest evenings ever. We turned up 2 weeks later to do the next performance, and we were not congratulated. We were given a sort of vague ticking off, because apparently it was bloody difficult to do the edit, and people would be laughing. People were laughing in the studios, and people at home would be thinking, what are they laughing at, But of course, that's the way it always was, I think.
But that's the spirit of Ken as well, isn't it? Because
exactly.
during the filming of Round the Horne, he would just ad-lib like anything, wouldn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. Although a lot of the ad-libs, this is according to Brian Cook, who was one of the writers, he said a lot of the ad-libs were written in, but you can always tell when he's off on one. They're just brilliant. I mean, sorry.
What's your favourite sauciest double entendre from the Kenneth Williams canon?
Oh God. Oh God. Oh, I wish you'd prep me on that. I mean, there's so many. It's like, what's your favourite word? Oh, I don't know. I can't think. I'll email it to you. But I mean, I just. By the way, I've also got a documentary from the radio, which is the Boner history of Julian and Sandy. Which, if anybody wants me to email it to them, I'm very happy to do that. And it's Maureen Lippman going through. It's a half-hour program, the history of Julian and Sandy and Polari and all that sort of thing. I also wanted to say that we used to meet so many celebrities when we were doing Round the Horne, because there's an intimate little theatre, and we would go and have champagne afterwards. So yeah, we really met incredible stars of American film stars and whatever. But one of the most incredible people was Amanda Barry, who played Cleo in Carry On Cleo, and she was Alma in Coronation Street. But she was married to Robin Hunter, which is really my real name. So that was kind of odd introducing myself after that. But she used to live with Hugh Paddock, and she claims that she taught him Polari because she'd been a hoofer, and it was very much a hoofer's language as well. And
Sorry,
yeah, so that was
a hoofer. What's a hoofer?
Hoofer, dancer.
Oh. Okay, just going into the chat box, because I realised quite a few people left.
Asked me to leave. Is he ever going to shut up?
No, just ask questions about about Polari generally as well. Like Alex, you asked a question saying, "Is Polare related to Polari?" Which was that your question? Does the name Polare come from Polari?
I saw Dan spell it parlare, A-L-A-R-E, because I've seen it spelled multiple ways. So I wanted to parlare.
It comes from parlare, which is Italian for to speak, but there are many different ways of spelling Polari. There's many different ways of spelling many different words within Polari because of there being very many different dialects of it. You know, as I said, Scouse Polari being different from East End Polari, which is different from West End Polari. So that's why there's different versions of it. But Polari itself, as in Italian parlare to speak. But
also, what you were saying was it was a language which, for various reasons, was not written down very much. So obviously, when people came to spell it, they were just different ways of spelling it, weren't they?
One of the first questions as well that John asked is, can you describe a typical owner or manager of a molly house and who benefited economically from the establishment of the molly houses? From what I've read, and the main source book that I've been looking at is Mother Clapp's Molly's House, which was actually named, and I don't think it was usual, but there was one woman who ran a very successful molly house with like 40 rooms in Holborn, who was a woman. Now, all the other molly houses that I can see were run by men, but I think it's quite interesting, actually, that we've got this woman, Mother Clapp, and when she was eventually, I think she died in prison, and in her testimony, in her court case, she was like, I can't possibly be interested in any of this, I'm a woman. So it's interesting that you have, but I mean, like, similarly, economically, I think it's quite an interesting time because of how many women were working in sex work. Was apparently the 1 in 5 women in London during the 1700s would have been working in sex work. So it would have been quite a big industry as well in London. But yeah, we'll be learning more about this as we go along, and also in Dan's actual walking tour when all this is over. Has anybody got any other? So somebody asked, can we have a reading list? And I will send any more posts and any references that have come up to everybody after this.
And a film list as well. I can send my favourite gay films from the 1960s.
Okay, also we got a question from Jack saying, do any of the Molly spoons still exist in collections or museums, apart from the ones we make? This I'm not sure at the moment, but I'm trying to speak to the V&A about it, because actually at the end of the month we've got a Zoom with Sian, who is a puppeteer, and she's going to be talking to us about Punch and Judy and about marionettes, and about puppets and theatre of the period. But I haven't found, from my own research, I haven't found any actual Molly dolls. But I've found like people who are creating dolls from the period in the style of those dolls. So if I do, I will share them with you. Any other questions before I round it up in the next minute or two? Let's see. Okay, well, thank you all for joining us. I'm really sorry about all the technical problems at the start. Hopefully we'll have all that smoothed out by the next one. But yeah, basically you've all opted in to receiving emails and updates from me. So if you don't want to receive emails, let me know, because I'm going to be telling you all about the different Zoom workshops that we're going to be running. And if you've got any questions or any suggestions for the project, things that you would like us to cover, then please feel free to email me as well. Okay, so I'm going to say bye-bye, and we'll be back in 2 weeks' time talking to Alex Etchart from the Sex Workers Opera about sex workers from the 18th century. Okay, all right, nice to see you. Have a good day. Okay,
Thanks,
bye.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Oh, Dan.
Yes.
You were asking what my favourite little bit was the Boner Detective Agency, and Kenneth Williams is talking about Hugh Paddock's character, saying, he's a great fan of Holmes. He loves Holmes, because you know, as in Sherlock Holmes, and for me that I absolutely that makes me piss myself laughing.
And also, did you get dragged up on deck? No, I can't. Was.
Absolutely, I've got that written down here as one of the things I was going to say. Oh, but I have to also tell you that we did it at the Royal Variety Show, and we fucking died.
Oh,
no, the audience is full of Americans and whatever, and no one understood when I said "Bonus to Fardia, Dolly Oldies" for the first time. I had to do it nothing. And we bowed to silence in front of 3,000 people.
Oh, God. What?
That bad. Oh, Prince Charles loved it.
Robin, it's been a delight talking to you.
It's been great to talk to you.
Really, really
Keep in
has.
touch.
Yes, I'd love to.
Fantastic. I'm readily available.
Great. Oh, there I'm ducky.
Okay, lots and lots of love.
Okay.
Take care. Goodbye. Bye, Ray.
Bye.